Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Hindustan Times, and my name is Aisha Varma. February 24th, 2022. Russia's invasion of Ukraine changed the global landscape, and what followed was the first full scale war in Europe since World War II. Ukraine's president has been on the ground himself, donning military attire in a move to inspire Ukrainian forces. And on August 15th, United States President Donald Trump rolled out the red carpet for the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, who stepped onto American soil for the first time in 10 years. The one question on everyone's minds is this: will the Trump Putin meet in Alaska end the Ukraine war? Joining us at this point to analyze the high stakes meet is Mr. Andrew Kuchins, Senior Fellow, Center for the National Interest. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us and taking out the time to speak with us.
Delighted to be with you.
Let's talk about a few of the key moments at the beginning of the Alaska summit. Trump and Putin had that first handshake on the tarmac. Trump quite literally rolled out the red carpet. He extended his hand first. Putin was greeted by a bomber formation flypast. He even rode with the US president in the Beast. How do you analyze these moments?
Well, I think it is Mr. Trump acting as a gracious host. He certainly believes he has a good personal relationship with Vladimir Putin, and uh, I think that while there's been a lot of criticism from many quarters about the red carpet and the military flyover, what I'd say about the military flyover, the jets, in a way, that's kind of a show of American military power. Uh, but you know, uh, he wanted to create a warm atmosphere for the discussions with Mr. Putin.
What do you think the broader message is that's being sent by not having any Ukrainian or European officials at the meet?
Well, I mean, this has been kind of a standard protocol for Mr. Trump since the beginning of his second term, and uh, his approach to trying to end the Ukrainian war. So I don't think there's any surprise there. It is important that he spoke with Mr. Zelensky. He spoke with European leaders during the week in the run up to this. And now we see that Mr. Zelensky has been invited to Washington on Monday to meet with President Trump.
So, while we do look ahead at that meeting, when it comes to the meeting that's taken place between Trump and Putin, one thing did change. Two aides for each leader were added to the meeting, and it was earlier thought to be a one-on-one conversation. Why do you think this change was made?
Well, it is standard protocol for two heads of state um, to meet with other members of their team in the room. What was unusual, of course, was 2018 when Mr. Putin and Mr. Trump met in Helsinki and they met one on one. And there was nobody taking notes, and the meeting was really uh, rather very unsuccessful. So I think perhaps Mr. Trump has learned something from that. I think one lesson about this meeting that took place yesterday is it helps to illustrate to us why it's very important that for major summit meetings between world leaders that there is a lot of advance work done by members of the team, and in fact, most of the points that will be that will come out of the summit have in effect been agreed to in advance. So it minimizes the risk involved for both leaders with that. But this is just not Mr. Trump's style. He likes to wing it on his own, and he has a tremendous amount of confidence in his own abilities to, well, basically to essentially get what he wants out of the meeting. But Mr. Putin is an extremely experienced and challenging interlocutor for anybody to deal with. And myself, my wife, most of my professional colleagues did not really expect much to happen with this meeting. Mr.
Okay.
Putin, yeah,
Oh, do continue.
okay, Mr. Putin. is quite satisfied that he got the invitation to come to the United States,
Yeah.
in effect, breaking out of international, well, at least isolation from the West, so to speak,
Mm.
and that he got the one-on-one with Mr. Trump, and he, in effect, as far as we know, made no significant concessions. I mean, that was kind of a bizarre press conference afterwards,
Mm.
in that
Exactly.
there were, the two leaders, described the meeting relatively positively, but in effect, there were absolutely no announcements about what was achieved. What was the actual progress on which specific issues? And the fact that they couldn't do that, I think, speaks to the fact that there was not an agreement on the big issues. Mr. Trump said so himself, that we made a lot of progress, but there's no
Yes.
deal until there's a deal. And the major sticking point was the ceasefire. And now and that didn't happen. And subsequently, Mr. Trump has essentially accepted Vladimir Putin's position that we should not bother with a ceasefire, but in
Mm.
effect work on negotiations towards a complete peace agreement.
Absolutely. One of the most crucial points I think that came out of this, bouncing off what you were just talking about, the press conference, Putin spoke first. He set the tone that way. You'd already quoted the fact that Trump had said there was some great progress that had been made. There were a few issues left to resolve. Overall, this meeting is being seen as more of a victory for Putin instead of Trump. Do you agree on that?
Yes, certainly. I think Mr. Putin got out of the meeting what he wanted to get out of the meeting, and Mr. Trump did not get out of the meeting what he wanted to get out of the meeting. So, as far as things stand now and the information that we have, yes, it does
Mm.
look like a more of a win for Vladimir Putin. I think now Mr. Trump really has to kind of reconsider the approach that he's taken to Mr. Putin with this. And I've been writing and talking about for months, virtually ever since Trump started his second term, that he needs to make the sticks seem credible. He's been very good at offering Mr. Putin carrots,
Mm.
but the sticks he's been reluctant to follow through on, and the most obvious one is his talk about sanctions. So I hope that Donald Trump is going to kind of reconsider the approach. He needs to be more clear that he is completely in line with Mr. Zelensky and our European allies, and that it was very unfortunate that Mr. Trump and the administration um, uh, broke off their American direct supplies of military equipment to Ukraine. That is a big win for Vladimir Putin. Now he did come back, and he is, willing to sell weaponry to European allies who can transfer the weapons to Mr. Zelensky. So it's not a total loss, but
Mm.
he just needs to put more pressure on Mr. Putin. I'm not confident that it's going to work. I mean, Mr. Putin's strategy has been from the get-go since February 24th, 2022, that you noted
Mm.
in the beginning of your remarks, is that the the Russians can outlast the Ukrainians. The Russians can outlast the West. They can outlast the United States. And Mr. Putin has been very dogged in sticking to that strategy, and not moving off it. And I think it's Donald Trump is a very unusual leader, certainly for the United States, but in general, and he has to get beyond his inflated view of his own capacity to convince people to do things that they really don't want to,
Yes.
and be a little bit more humble, I think, in coming to it. He looked tired. He looked kind of frustrated. He didn't look irritated, but I think and I hope that as he reviews what happened, and as he talks to more of his team, as he talks to his wife Melania, as he talks to Mr. Zelensky, it's going to lead him to the conclusion that he must alter the tactics that he's taking with Mr. Putin. Again, I'm not confident that there's going to be success with that, but
Okay.
if you're Uh, he- what he's doing is not working. That's clear.
I'm curious, during the press conference, Trump had said that there were a few, basically, he said that there were many, many points that were agreed on. Most of them, I think he said, were a couple of big ones that they haven't quite gotten there. They've made some headway. But what do you think some of the sticking points were?
Well, I think the big sticking point is uh, getting to a ceasefire immediately.
Okay.
I think that's the major sticking point. That's the major thing that Donald Trump wanted to get out of the meeting, and he didn't get. Just to go back to the point about the preparation for summit meetings, it was striking to
Yes.
me that in the press conference afterwards, that Mr. Putin had a large stack of talking points on cards that he read
Hmm.
from. Uh, and I'm virtually certain that those talking points were prepared in advance of the meeting. Um, and he 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 was a little bit less long-winded than he usually is, and you could see that he was taking out cards kind of as he was going along, but he was clearly prepared to. He knew what he was going to say, and he knew what he was going to say in advance, and that to me was a strong contrast between the style and the lack of more professional preparation for the meeting on his part, in contrast with that of Mr. Trump's and the Americans.
All right. Would you be able to also shed light on why the meeting was held in Alaska?
um, well, it is. Okay, aside from the fact that this was formerly Russian territory up until
Yeah.
1867, when the United States bought it from Russia. This was kind of a midway point. It it's a good question, and I don't have an immediate great answer to it, but it's a midway point, so they both travel, yet it's on U.S. territory.
Hmm.
And how they came to that, I don't know. It's much more typical that they would meet in Helsinki, or they meet in Geneva, or they would meet in
Like
Vienna.
2018. Yeah.
Yeah, like 2018, and where so many, remember the 1986 meeting between Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev in Reykjavik, uh, and that's a much more typical place for a meeting between U.S. and, I mean, somewhere in Europe, or
Mm.
possibly Doha or the Middle East, which is kind of taken on this role. Turkey, but this was Alaska, and I think that was a bit of a surprise to most of us following this, and it kind of
Oh,
contributed
okay.
to Mr. Trump being a bit more vulnerable, I suppose, to criticism, and that
Mm.
he's welcoming on U.S. territory the Russian leader who has been indicted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes, et cetera, et cetera, and then to give him the red carpet and the military flyover we all discussed. But there you have it.
Absolutely. It's a very interesting aspect, as you were also mentioning. In a 2014 article, you also had written about the danger of a full-scale war in Ukraine. In 2022, then we saw that become a reality. Territorial concessions have been spoken about, access to rare earth minerals as well. Putin wants guarantees that Ukraine won't become part of NATO. In fact, it's one of the reasons he invaded Ukraine, which has been quoted. What do you think is actually going to be required for the Russia-Ukraine war to end?
Well, I think it is usually the case of wars of attrition, in that one side decides they can no longer. It's no longer in their interest to fight the war, and that is not the case with either Russia or Ukraine at this point. Um, so I'm afraid that the war is going to have to continue. Um, uh, you know, that's a rather sad, even tragic. It's really a tragic scenario, actually, because it means there's going to be a lot more deaths, thousands, tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of military deaths, until one side or the other is really ready to throw in the towel.
The US president had also said that Russia and Ukraine's leaders, Putin and Zelensky respectively, would set up a meeting. You'd already mentioned that meeting that's going to be taking place on Monday between Zelensky and Trump. I'm curious, do you see a trilateral meeting happening? Do you think it could lead to any concrete outcome?
I don't see a trilateral meeting between Zelensky, Putin, and Trump anytime soon, unless there was much more positive progress made than the two leaders uh, led us to believe yesterday. Um, you know, they talked about a meeting in Moscow, at least between the two of them. But no, I don't see the justification for a trilateral meeting anytime soon. But it's going to be it's very be very interesting to watch the meeting between Zelensky and Trump and what comes out of that, and if in fact Trump does indicate that he's making some adjustments in his role as mediator. When I was watching his body language yesterday, I felt that, and he had talked about this before, that if if this is not successful, then he's ready to step out of it. And he did make a comment yesterday that his advice to the Ukrainians was to come to an agreement with the Russians, almost like he was very close to stepping out himself. But then subsequently, we heard about the invitation to Zelensky to come to Washington. So the uh, the film continues.
What is your perspective on the current state of US-Russian affairs? Because in the past few months, we've seen Trump call Putin crazy. Oh, I was just saying that that frustration was clearly dialed down, as in he didn't really show it so much in body language, at least during the meeting.
Yeah, there's a striking contrast in the deference and the patience that Mr. Trump is ready to show Mr. Putin than he is toward
Hmm.
Mr. Zelensky. Or remember the
Hmm.
fairly catastrophic meeting in the White House back in February, where JD Vance and Zelensky got into a pretty heated argument, and Mr. Trump himself was clearly very unhappy and irritated with things. That was the contrast between how much. Um, I mean, Trump has not been. One thing I kind of like about Donald Trump is that he's very clear about how he feels about people and how he feels about issues.
Hmm.
And he showed tremendous deference and warmth towards Kim Jong Un in the first term when he was trying to work out a deal with the North Koreans, and how he treats Vladimir Putin is very resonant, I think, with that. Whereas he's quite ready to take a pretty harsh stance on his allies, the Europeans and Mr. Zelensky. He's pretty ready to take a harsh stance on the tariffs that he announced recently toward India in response to India's continuing to buy Russian oil, while on the
Hmm.
other hand, the Chinese, who are buying more oil from the Russians, seem to get a free pass. So there's a lot of differentiated treatment, and
Hmm.
and Trump is kind of. That doesn't seem to bother him. He doesn't really. I don't think he really thinks in terms of contradictions. He thinks in terms of personal relationships. He clearly has a bias toward more authoritarian leaders, and he's been pretty frank about that, in particular with Mr. Putin.
And now
And
speaking of
it's
Zelensky,
not working.
yeah. Speaking of Zelensky, he held an urgent phone call with Trump after the meet with Putin. Zelensky also said that it was important that Europeans are involved at every stage to ensure reliable security guarantees together with America. Do you think Putin will agree to include Europe in any negotiations?
Not if he can avoid it.
Okay.
Um, and so far, he has been able to avoid it. I mean, Putin for 20-25 years. Well, especially since he started taking a more aggressive stance towards the West in his second term, 2004 to 2008, and the watershed point being his very anti-West speech at the Munich Security Conference in 2007.
Mm,
constantly refers to the West as a lackey of the United States, and that it is a vassal. It is not an ally. That it does not have its own sovereignty because it gives up its sovereignty to the United States, et cetera, et cetera. He's very, very disdainful of that, and there's some of that with Donald Trump as well. Um, and what has been positive, I think, since Mr. Trump came to power in his second term, back in February and March, is that he has gotten the Europeans to take much more responsibility for their own defense than they'd wanted to in the past. I mean, U.S. presidents for decades have wanted the Europeans to spend more on their own security and not be free riders to the American nuclear and security umbrella. And so that is, I think that's a positive development. I think it's a good thing that for Europe and for the United States, that the Europeans are showing that they have the commitment, the to distance themselves from the United States when there are significant differences, as there have been here on Ukraine.
mm,
Um, but it's still it's a very, very tricky, challenging task, I think, to find the sweet spot. Change is always difficult in any for humans
mm,
in any kind of context, and this is a pretty big change for the U.S. European security relationship, which, in my view, has been overdue. Going back to the end of the Cold War, frankly, um,
mm.
uh, that is happening now. But the my concern about Mr. Trump is that he has been ready to throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak, and completely break from Europeans with security ties. And I don't think that is in certainly not in. I don't think it's in U.S. interest, and it's not in European interests. But they are. I think we are finding a way toward that. Um, One of the most interesting things I read in the run up to this
Mm.
meeting was an article in the Wall Street Journal about the Alexander Stubb, who has kind of
Okay.
become a Trump whisperer. He is someone that Trump really, really respects, and Alex and Stubb has and Trump apparently asked him, can I trust Vladimir Putin? And Stubb was very frank, no, you can't, and you need to take a tougher stance with him. Now it helps on Stubb's part that Stubb is an excellent golfer. In fact, he was undergraduate at Furman University in South Carolina on a golf
Yeah.
scholarship, and his initial goal was to become a professional golfer, and he's still a good golfer. And in fact,
Yeah.
after they had met down in Florida and played a couple of rounds of golf, Trump gave him a new set of golf clubs. I mean, Stubb was using golf clubs that he'd had for 20 years.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be another. I think and hope there's going to be another conversation between Donald Trump and Alexander Stubb, that's a very positive thing that he's established such a rapport with a European leader, and of course the Finns have long experience as bordering the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, and now Russia, and how to manage them.
All right. Mr. Kuchins, thank you very much for that tidbit. Thank you so much for joining us and providing us with insight on
Thank you so much.
this
It's a
crucial
pleasure to
meeting
speak with
between
you
the two leaders.
this evening in Delhi and this morning here in Virginia. And hopefully we'll be talking again in the not too distant future.
Likewise.